480 BCE, when war became spectacle.
Late autumn, October 484 BCE, just before dawn. The air over Babylon is thick with kiln smoke and the metallic scent of wet bronze. Torches flicker against the city's mud brick walls, and somewhere in the distance, a hammer strikes iron, slow, deliberate, final. Inside the palace compound, a royal decree is being read aloud in Old Persian. Witnesses would later claim the courtyard fell silent except for the crackle of pitch torches and the rustle of silk robes. The order came from Xerxes I, ruler of an empire stretching from the Indus to the Aegean, and it would change the fate of one of the ancient world's greatest cities forever. According to ancient sources, statues were torn down, noble families vanished overnight, and the sacred political identity of Babylon, its kingship tradition, stretching back nearly 1,500 years, was deliberately erased. But this wasn't an isolated act of cruelty. Historical records show a pattern. Punishments inflicted not just on enemies, but on relatives, courtiers, and entire populations. Acts meant to send a message that echoed across continents. The sounds of chisels striking stone, the smell of burning cedar beams, the cold administrative precision of imperial power. How does a ruler decide to break a city instead of simply conquering it? What kind of political psychology turns punishment into spectacle? And why did some ancient observers describe these moments with both horror and awe? Today, we're diving into 5 documented acts of warfare and repression so brutal that cities and identities never truly recovered. By 486 BCE, the Achaemenid Empire was the largest political entity the world had ever seen, roughly 5.5 million square kilometers. It governed dozens of cultures, languages, and religions. And when Xerxes inherited the throne from Darius I, he inherited something else: instability. Rebellions flared almost immediately. Egypt revolted around 486 to 484 BCE. Babylon followed soon after. These weren't minor disturbances, they threatened imperial legitimacy itself. Ancient historians, especially Herodotus, describe a court obsessed with loyalty. But we should be careful. Herodotus wrote decades later, blending eyewitness testimony with storytelling. His work gives texture, but modern scholars cross-reference it with cuneiform tablets and archaeological layers to separate propaganda from probability. And yet, patterns emerge. According to multiple sources, Xerxes ruled through both administrative sophistication and theatrical punishment. The empire maintained royal roads spanning 2,700 kilometers, a standardized taxation system, and a bureaucracy capable of moving tens of thousands of troops. But fear was also a tool, visible, memorable, and intentionally symbolic. Why symbolism? Because in a pre-modern empire, perception could matter as much as force. If distant provinces believed rebellion meant annihilation, fewer rebellions might occur. But there's a paradox here. Excessive brutality can also destabilize authority. Political scientists call this the repression paradox. Too much violence can undermine legitimacy instead of reinforcing it. And that tension sits at the heart of our story. So as we move into the first incident, keep one question in mind. Was this calculated statecraft, or the personal paranoia of an emperor under pressure? The revolt of Babylon, around 484 BCE, is one of the clearest examples where archaeology and written sources intersect. Cuneiform tablets abruptly stop referencing the traditional title King of Babylon after this period. Instead, Xerxes adopts the broader title King of Lands. According to Herodotus and later writers like Ctesias, the suppression was ruthless. Temples were looted, city fortifications dismantled, elite families deported or executed. Now, historians debate the scale. Some scholars argue Herodotus exaggerated to dramatize Persian tyranny for Greek audiences. But there's hard evidence. Administrative tablets drop sharply, and certain temple complexes show signs of structural dismantling dating to the early 5th century BCE. Why target temples? Because in Babylon, religion and political authority were inseparable. Undermining the priesthood meant dismantling the ideological backbone of resistance. Imagine the psychological impact. A city that had crowned rulers since the time of Hammurabi suddenly stripped of its ceremonial kingship. Generations raised on the belief that Babylon was the center of the cosmos, now living under an empire that treated it as just another province. And here's the deeper question. When you erase a city's symbols, do you conquer its people or just their past? But Babylon wasn't the only example. Ancient narratives describe a pattern of escalating punishments designed to reinforce obedience. Herodotus recounts a chilling episode involving the Hellespont around 480 BCE. After a storm destroyed a massive pontoon bridge, a strategic lifeline for the invasion of Greece, Xerxes allegedly ordered the waters whipped and branded with hot irons. Now, did this literally happen? Many historians see it as symbolic storytelling, illustrating the king's hubris. But even if exaggerated, it reflects how contemporaries perceived his rule: theatrical, punitive, and absolute. More concrete is the reported execution of nobles suspected of disloyalty. According to ancient accounts, entire households could be punished collectively, a tactic designed to deter conspiracy by making loyalty a family survival strategy. Collective punishment creates a chilling psychological environment. Modern sociologists compare it to high-control authoritarian systems, where fear spreads through social networks faster than any army could march. And with each act, the message became clearer. Resistance would not just fail, it would be remembered. The Greek campaign between 480 to 479 BCE became the empire's most famous military venture. Battles like Thermopylae and Salamis are often told from the Greek perspective, but from the Persian viewpoint, they were logistical feats involving perhaps 100,000 to 200,000 troops. Ancient writers like Diodorus Siculus describe reprisals against cities that resisted, including the burning of Athens in 480 BCE. Temples were destroyed, statues toppled, not simply collateral damage, but symbolic punishment. And yet, even here, nuance matters. Archaeological layers show rebuilding began within decades. Athens recovered. Babylon, by contrast, never regained its political centrality. Why the difference? Because punishment isn't just about destruction. It's about what you replace it with. Was Xerxes trying to make examples, or reshape the political map entirely? In the decades after Xerxes' reign, Babylon remained economically active, but politically diminished. Its role shifted from imperial partner to administrative province. Ancient observers like Plutarch portray the king as increasingly isolated, a ruler surrounded by court intrigue and suspicion. Whether this reflects reality or moral storytelling is debated, but it reveals how later generations interpreted his legacy, power shadowed by fear. Shockwaves rippled across the empire. Local elites learned a clear lesson: loyalty wasn't optional, but fear-based systems often breed hidden resentment, a factor historians see contributing to later instability under subsequent rulers. Patterns like this appear across cultures. Assyrian kings in the 7th century BCE used mass deportations. Roman generals razed Carthage in 146 BCE. Mongol campaigns in the 13th century CE devastated cities from Nishapur to Baghdad. Ancient historian Xenophon, writing about Persian governance, emphasized discipline and hierarchy, suggesting brutality coexisted with administrative sophistication. This cross-cultural pattern raises a question. Is extreme punishment a universal tool of empire or a sign of insecurity? One of the most lasting consequences wasn't physical destruction, but identity erosion. When Babylon lost its royal title and ceremonial centrality, its cultural prestige faded. By the time Alexander the Great entered the city in 331 BCE, it was still grand, but no longer the political heart of Mesopotamia. Cultural erasure works slowly. Languages shift, rituals disappear, collective memory reframes trauma into myth. And here's the haunting part. Cities can be rebuilt in 10 years. Identities can take centuries, if they recover at all. Modern psychology offers lenses ancient historians lacked. Leaders operating under constant threat often exhibit paranoia, hypervigilance, and punitive decision-making. High-stakes environments amplify cognitive dissonance, the need to justify extreme actions as necessary for stability. For populations, repeated exposure to violence can produce collective trauma akin to PTSD, shaping cultural narratives for generations. But we should avoid retroactive diagnosis. Xerxes wasn't a case study. He was a ruler navigating an enormous, fragile system. His decisions were shaped by politics, tradition, and the expectations of kingship in the ancient Near East. Still, the human dimension matters, because history isn't just systems and empires, it's fear, pride, and perception. So what do we take from these 5 acts of imperial brutality? First, power built on fear can be incredibly effective in the short term, but it often leaves deep fractures beneath the surface. Second, symbolic action, al-Qawa'i, destroying a temple, stripping a title, punishing a family, can reshape history as much as battlefield victories. And finally, narratives matter. Much of what we know comes through writers with their own biases. Separating fact from interpretation is part of the historian's craft, and part of being an informed citizen today. Because the core questions haven't changed in 2,500 years. How should leaders respond to dissent? When does security become oppression? And what responsibilities come with absolute power? If this story made you rethink what victory really means, tell me in the comments. Do you believe fear can ever create lasting stability? Or does it always plant the seeds of collapse? And if you want more deeply researched stories where history feels alive, the sounds, the choices, the consequences, subscribe and join me for the next journey into the past. Because the past isn't gone, it's a mirror.